Hello and welcome to The Critique, where today we are breaking down a comprehensive guide on habit formation, covering the 1% rule, identity shifts, and the 4 laws of behavior change. The opening argument effectively juxtaposes the math of compounding improvement against the failure of goal setting, yet the bridge between these two concepts feels slightly underdeveloped.
Yeah, it really is a bit of a leap of faith right now.
It is.
Because we have this incredible hook right at the start, The mathematical certainty that improving 1% daily makes you 37 times better in a year.
Which is super seductive. It completely grabs you.
Exactly. But then immediately after that, the text just asserts that winners focus on systems. And that's the weakness here. The text jumps from the mathematical certainty of becoming 37 times better directly to the assertion that you need a system without actually explaining why.
Right, it completely relies on the reader to intuitively understand why the 1% math requires a system rather than a goal.
And that's a lot to ask of the reader. It feels like two separate, strong points just sitting next to each other rather than one cohesive argument.
Because if you focus on the 37 times better outcome, it distracts from the invisibility of the daily process. Like the draft lists examples such as how a top exam rank requires 5 hours of deep work, but that doesn't explain the mechanism of why a goal fails.
A goal looks for results, and a 1% improvement is basically invisible to the naked eye. If I work out today, I'm not going to see a change in the mirror tomorrow.
Right. So the suggestion here is to connect the invisible nature of the 1% daily change directly to the necessity of a system.
Yes, explain that. Because the 1% is invisible, a goal, which looks for visible results, is going to fail you. You must rely on a system, because a system looks for action.
And for a concrete example, we don't even need to invent a new metaphor. We can use the bamboo analogy from section 4 right here.
Oh, moving it up. I like that.
Yeah, because in the book Atomic Habits, the author conveys that bamboo grows underground for years before suddenly shooting up. It's the perfect metaphor. The system is what waters the bamboo while it is underground and invisible.
So if you just rewrite that transition to explicitly say that you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, it bridges that gap beautifully.
Exactly. You just write, because a 1% improvement is invisible to the naked eye, you cannot rely on goals to track it, you must rely on a system to execute it.
That is so much stronger. It stops the reader from asking why and just gets them nodding along.
Moving on to the next section. The section on identity-based habits captures the philosophical shift required for change, but it risks oversimplifying the psychological friction involved in that shift.
Yeah, this part stood out to me. The weakness is that the advice to just pick one identity and then do just that treats identity like a light switch.
Like you can just turn it on?
Right. It implies that simply saying, I am a disciplined trader, allows you to immediately act like one. It completely ignores the imposter syndrome phase of habit building.
Because if you're currently unhealthy, standing in front of a mirror and saying, I am a healthy person, is going to feel like a lie.
It creates massive cognitive dissonance. You feel like a fraud. And people who feel like frauds usually just quit.
So the suggestion here is to introduce the concept of voting more aggressively to bridge the gap between the old self and the new self.
I completely agree. We need to frame the actions, not as proof of the new identity, but as evidence being collected to build it.
Because right now, the current text says things like, you don't study because exams are near, you study because you are becoming a disciplined person.
Which is fine, but it misses the mark slightly. Focus on the specific line from the source material instead. Every action you take is a vote. In the book Atomic Habits, the author conveys that the goal isn't to be the person immediately, but to cast enough votes to win the election.
So a concrete action for the revision would be to suggest phrasing like, I am casting a vote for a healthy person today.
Exactly.
Rather than I am a healthy person.
Which takes all the pressure off. It validates the struggle. It says, I'm building this new self brick by brick, vote by vote.
It's just so much more forgiving. If you miss a gym session, you didn't lose your identity. You just didn't cast a vote for it today. You can cast one tomorrow. Absolutely. Okay, let's look at the actual structure of the laws. The breakdown of the 4 laws is logically structured, yet the repetitive formatting of concept, quote, and action step risks inducing reader fatigue by the 3rd law.
Yeah, the weakness is that the structure is just too rigid. By separating the explanation from the action step every single time, the narrative flow is completely broken.
It starts feeling like a textbook. Law 1, quote, bullet point. Law 2, quote, bullet point.
The reader stops reading for understanding and just starts scanning for the bullet points. They just want the tactical stuff and they lose the context.
Because if you just have a standalone bullet point that says delete Instagram, it feels like a punishment, like a chore.
Right, so the suggestion is to integrate the action steps directly into the narrative explanation of the laws. Show the laws in motion rather than as a checklist at the end of a section.
We want to turn the manual into a story.
Exactly. For a concrete example, looking at Law 1, make it obvious. Instead of listing delete Instagram as a standalone bullet, weave it into a story about environment design.
Describe a high-discipline environment. Paint a picture of a desk where the phone is absent and the books are already open on the desk.
Yes, and for Law 2, make it attractive. You can discuss temptation bundling as a narrative example of how to trick the brain rather than just a tactical instruction like watch Netflix only after you study.
And we can use the concept of environment being greater than willpower as the narrative thread to connect Law 1 and Law 2 seamlessly.
That's a great hook, because you can't rely on willpower, it runs out. If you weave that narrative through the laws, they have to actually read the paragraph to understand how to set up the trap for their own bad habits.
It stops him from skimming.
It really does. It respects the reader's intelligence much more.
Now, regarding the execution of these habits, the application of the Make It Easy law highlights excellent tactical advice regarding the 2-minute rule, but it lacks a discussion on how to transition out of this phase.
This is a critical gap. The text heavily advises shrinking habits down to 2 minutes. Read 1 page, write 1 sentence.
Which is great for overcoming inertia.
It is, but the weakness is it doesn't address the risk of staying at just 1 page forever. A reader's going to look at that and wonder, how does reading 1 page get me to read a whole book?
Right, it validates the start, but it completely ignores the progression. The text says you are not building performance, you are building consistency, which is true for week 1.
But if you're still doing 1 push-up after 6 months, you aren't growing.
So our suggestion here is to pair the 2-minute rule immediately with the Goldilocks rule, which is currently sitting in the advanced lesson section.
We need to explain the actual life cycle of the habit. You establish it with the 2-minute rule, then you optimize it, then you challenge it with the Goldilocks rule.
We explicitly link the concept of building consistency to progressive overload.
Exactly. A concrete example of this would be to create a timeline in the text.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, say something like, days 1 through 7, read 1 page. That's the Make It Easy phase. Then days 8 through 14, read 1 chapter. That's the Goldilocks rule, where it's just slightly challenging.
You're showing the path from easy to hard.
Because the reader needs to see that easy is just the on-ramp, it's not the destination. Without the connection to the Goldilocks rule, the 2-minute rule just feels like a gimmick.
It totally answers the skeptic who thinks the advice is too soft. Let's look at how these mornings are structured. The visualization of the Valley of Disappointment provides necessary emotional resonance, yet placing it near the end of the document diminishes its power as a preventative warning.
Yeah, this structural choice really diminishes the impact. The weakness is that this concept explains why people quit early, but by placing it in section 4 after all the how-to advice, the reader might have already mentally checked out.
Or they assume the action steps are going to yield to instant results.
Exactly. If they start the habits in section 3 and don't see results in a week, they might quit before they ever even scroll down to section 4.
It's like putting a warning label on the bottom of a coffee cup. You only see it after you've burned yourself.
That's a great way to put it. The suggestion is to move the plateau of latent potential up to the beginning, right after the 1% rule.
Yes. If the reader knows about the Valley of Disappointment before they start attempting the 4 laws, they are basically inoculated against failure.
A concrete way to do this is to contrast the bamboo grows underground imagery directly with the compound interest graph early on.
You show them the graph of what they expect to happen, which is a straight line going up, and then you show them the graph of what will happen, which is the dip, the valley.
This framing completely transforms the document from a simple how-to into a survival guide. It tells the reader, hey, you are going to feel like quitting around day 14, and here is exactly why you shouldn't.
It manages their expectations from minute 1. When the pain hits, they won't think they're failing. They'll just realize they're in the valley.
Exactly.
Okay, finally, let's look at how the document wraps up. The concluding message regarding the boredom of success is intellectually honest, but the tone could be pivoted to be more inspiring rather than purely stoic.
Yeah, the ending is a bit stark. The source ends on, "Massive success is boring. It is repetitive."
Which is true.
It's very true. But the weakness is that leaving the reader with the word boring as the final emotional beat is pretty risky. It makes the entire journey sound like a drudge.
It emphasizes the pain of repetition without fully celebrating the power of the results.
The suggestion here is to reframe boring as automatic or peaceful. We need to shift the focus from the pain of repetition to the power of the trajectory.
Use that great quote from the material. You should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than with your current results.
For a concrete example of how to revise this, you can keep the current text that says success is boring and built on days when you don't feel like it. Keep that intellectual honesty, but then immediately pivot.
Conclude by saying that while the routine is boring, the result, becoming unstoppable, is thrilling.
Yes. Frame the boredom as the price of admission for greatness. The 1% compound interest makes the boredom worth it.
It changes the whole aftertaste of the piece from "this is going to be hard work" to "this is going to be incredibly worth it."
You want them closing the tab feeling ready to attack the boredom, not dreading it.
Exactly. So to quickly recap the actionable fixes we've discussed today, first, link the math of the 1% rule directly to the need for systems. Explain that because progress is invisible, goals fail and systems succeed.
Right, and use that bamboo analogy early.
Second, use the concept of voting to explain identity shifts. You're casting votes to build evidence, not just flipping a switch to fake an identity.
Solves the imposter syndrome issue immediately.
Third, integrate the tactical steps into the narrative flow of the 4 laws to prevent checklist fatigue. Make it a story about environment design.
Show the laws in motion. Fourth, pair the 2-minute rule with the Goldilocks rule to show clear progression. Days 1 to 7 are easy. Days 8 to 14 challenge you.
Show them the path from the on-ramp to the actual highway.
Fifth, move the valley of disappointment earlier in the piece to set accurate expectations and inoculate the reader against quitting.
Give them the safety briefing before the flight takes off.
And finally, pivot the closing tone from the boredom of success to the thrill of an unstoppable trajectory.
We highly encourage you to take these structural revisions, apply them to your draft, and submit the guide back to us for another round of feedback. Thank you for tuning in to The Critique.